Hi, my name is Ralph Bouquet, and I'd like to welcome you to the Gaming the System webinar. I'm really happy that you decided to join us tonight as we talk about how we can use games in science classrooms. So at Nova, I am the outreach coordinator for Nova Labs, and basically I'm responsible for leading our outreach efforts to educators who are using Nova Labs, as well as our partnership opportunities with a variety of different STEM organizations. And today I'm really excited to explore a topic that has been an important part of what we are building here at Nova Labs, and has been a topic of growing interest in STEM education circles, and that is game-based learning. Today I'm going to be joined by Shane Donovan. Hi, Shane. Say hi to the audience, that'd be great. But Shane is an AP Physics and Robotics teacher at ELL Haynes Public Charter School in DC, and he spends a lot of time not only using games in his classroom, but also gamifying the classroom experience in order to engage his students. And Shane and I actually both taught high school science in Philadelphia with Teacher America for several years, and I'm really excited to have him here and just give him a little chance to sort of introduce himself and say hi to the audience.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ralph, for that introduction. Yes, I teach at EL Haynes Public Charter School in DC. This is my 6th year in the classroom, and I'm interested in gaming mechanics and what they can do for making your classroom a more interesting and exciting place. And so I'm going to run through a couple of what I consider principles behind using what games do to help make your classroom more engaging. The first, pardon me, gotta do my screen share. The first thing that I'm going to talk about are sort of principles behind gaming. So why do kids love video games, and how can we steal what video games do to make our classroom experience more engaging? And there's a couple of principles behind gaming mechanics that I think we can apply to classrooms. So the first is that good video games are goal-oriented. And so you think about like Super Mario, right? The goal is to rescue the princess. As chauvinistic as that may be, it is a goal, and you're motivated to achieve that goal. And every level has a little goal-oriented thing at the end where you got to jump and hit that little flag, right? And so if you have a goal-oriented classroom, you're going to get some engagement out of that, just like students are engaged in video games. The second principle is that video games offer instant feedback. In our classrooms, often we offer feedback as fast as we can, but it's hard to do it instantaneously the way games do. An example would be like Dance Dance Revolution, right? You're getting these perfects, or if you miss immediately, it's telling you that you did it wrong or you did it right. Or a video game from my childhood, you get instant feedback in the Oregon Trail when you die of dysentery, or if you do something exceptional. Very hard as a classroom teacher to give instant feedback as instantly as these games do, but if you can think to yourself, how can I give my students feedback faster? Classroom feels more like a game. Right? The last, not the last, but one of the other ones that's really important, I think, especially in science, is using inductive reasoning. So a lot of video games operate under this assumption where you're put in a situation. Again, in Mario, you got to beat the boss, right? And the first couple times you try and beat the boss, you probably die because you haven't figured out the pattern of how the boss moves. But eventually you figure out the pattern of how the boss moves, and then you can apply that pattern, and then you can beat the boss. And so anytime you can have students deduce a pattern through inductive reasoning and then apply it to something new, it feels more like a game and less like my teacher's talking at me and telling me how to do something, and then I'm performing the steps that my teacher has performed. Another great example is Guitar Hero, right? You never get taught how to read the rhythm of the notes in Guitar Hero. No one sits down and shows you that this much space is a quarter note or a half note or whatever. You just figure it out by playing. And that makes it engaging because once you've figured out the pattern, you can apply it and you feel really smart or really good at the game that you're playing. Along with inductive reasoning is a really important principle, which is penalty-free practice. So often in our classrooms, right, we give students the chance to practice something, but we actually grade it. We grade it for accuracy, which means there's a penalty associated with being wrong. In a lot of video games, the only penalty associated with being wrong is having to start over. And if kids are invested in the goal of the game, then they just want to start over because they're invested in wanting to reach the goal of the game. In a lot of other games, there's a penalty-free practice zone, which takes the form of multiplayer. Right? Mario Kart, you can race your 3 friends as often as you want. It's a chance to practice getting better, make fun of them when you beat them, and like engage in completely penalty-free practice. Same with another game, Halo. Right? Most games have some kind of multiplayer feature, and this is one of the things that really drives kids to be engaged in games. So how do you apply some of these principles concretely in your own classroom? Here's a few things you can try that I've tried, and I'd be happy to share more concrete resources about how I've done it. Oh, sorry, one more thing, my bad. Competency-based progression. Right? This seems really obvious in video games, that in Mario you start at World 1 and you cannot move to World 2 until you have beaten World 1. Right? Or a game from my childhood, GoldenEye, right? The levels unlock, and you can only unlock the next level by beating the previous. Rarely in classrooms do we put students in that position. My classroom is competency-based in its entirety, so students have to master a standard before they move on to the next, which means they move at different paces. But any way you can say to students, I'm sorry, you have to earn the right to move ahead. You don't move ahead because I say so as the teacher. You've got to earn it by beating this level. You've introduced a gaming mechanic that students find motivating as long as the first level is pretty easy and they can beat that level and feel good about themselves. So here's some concrete strategies you can try. Anything that has a concrete answer, like a problem set, simply having an answer key that exists and that you can give to kids helps provide instant feedback. Right? You can decide to give them, you only get to look at it once, or you get to look at it 3 times for 1 minute each, but letting students check their own work is kind of like the little thing that pops up in Dance Dance Revolution that tells you that you're hitting all those keys, or Guitar Hero that tells kids that they're hitting the buttons at the right time. Right? Second, really simple from elementary school, things like mastery charts and sticker charts do help reinforce a goal orientation in your classroom. We're all driving towards something. You're here, you've got to get here. And it's really pretty simple, but it does actually work. It only works if you refer to it all the time. You've got to refer to it constantly. You've got to point to it. When kids don't know what they're supposed to be doing, you've got to make them go look at it. Right? Then they will develop that goal orientation with you. The other idea would be earning an assessment. So I use this in my own classroom. Students can only take assessments on topics if they've completed the practice. They don't take a quiz because I say it's the day you're going to take your quiz. They take the quiz because they've shown me that they've completed all the practice aligned to that quiz, and therefore that they're probably going to do well. This strategy has increased the pass rate on my assessments tremendously. It's also a little tricky to manage because I've got different kids taking different assessments at different times, but not as tricky as you might think. Again, happy to talk to you more about that if you're interested in this idea. Another idea would be any way you can give students choice about how they assess or how they practice helps introduce a little bit of gaming mechanics, right? Choosing your own adventure, right? Maybe you give kids the option to speak about it, write about it, draw about it, right? And this is particularly relevant in science where multiple representations of content are really important. Being able to write, speak, draw a diagram, and do a calculation, right? And so any way you can do that helps kids feel like they're engaging in a game. The last, and this is harder, if there is a way to structure your content so that students have more than one way to progress through it, there are some games that are very popular like that. Some of these sort of world-based games like Warcraft or something where you get to just explore through the world or the universe at your own pace, and there is no one way to go through it, can sometimes be very engaging. Other kids really like the linear progression, the more Super Mario style. There's World 1, then World 2, then World 3. But you might want to consider offering both. Really specific things that I've used that you might like to use. If you want to just play review games, Jeopardy Labs, which is highlighted in the Google Hangout, you can look at it. It's a site to create Jeopardy games from. We also have a template you can use to play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with as a game, if you like that. To help reinforce a goal orientation, a website called Class Dojo, where you give students points based on whatever it is you want, can be very useful for classroom management and also particular academic engagement. And then personal mastery trackers that kids keep, or public ones that you show in the room I would advise if it's in the room that you anonymize it somehow. So you give kids numbers or they make up code names for themselves. Anything that can give instant feedback, again, you can make an answer key yourself. There are a lot of websites that will automatically provide kids with feedback about what they're doing, more so in math. I've listed a few down here. I'd be happy to talk to you more about those if you're interested. So those are just a few specific strategies that I've tried, but I think more important is just to remember those principles, because you can redesign a classroom activity to fit those principles. It doesn't have to look anything like a video game, but what counts is that kids feel it to be like a game.
Great. Nice. Thank you so much, Shane. And definitely, I mean, one of the things I really want to emphasize is sort of, I mean, besides what you sort of outlined in your presentation, I think there's a lot of evidence that's been done in quite a variety of studies about sort of the cognitive benefits of gamifying, of adding games to your curriculum. When I was looking over the APA has a really pretty large study they did, the benefits of playing video games, and really outlines a lot of great ideas with regards to how games have been shown to improve attention, focus, and reaction time. Sort of the motivation benefit of like using games in the classroom and encouraging sort of an incremental theory of intelligence that can develop over time. So there's a lot of other really great reasons for why games make sense in the context of science classrooms beyond just sort of the engagement factor, but also sort of the cognitive advantage as well. I think one really good group, and I definitely will include this link. And just a reminder to everybody who's watching, to the left, you should see icons, or to the right, rather, you should see icons for showcasing questions. So please feel free to ask us any questions or submit them via the Q&A app. There's also a showcase button, which allows you to see sort of all the resources that we're talking about. So if you want to revisit them at some point later on, they'll always be available if you visit this event on the Google Hangout page. But one study I really want to mention is that the GLASS lab, which is the Games and Learning Assessment Lab, did a 2013 study which found that, and I'm just going to quote this here, when digital games were compared to other instruction conditions without digital games, there was a moderate to strong effect in favor of digital games in terms of broad cognitive competencies. And I think, I mean, the number that they came out with was actually 12% increase in sort of instructional settings that included games. So there's definitely more at play here than just sort of the engagement factor of kids, sitting down and and seeing like, oh, we have laptops where we're playing a game. And I'm sure, I mean, Shane, is that something sort of that you've seen with your utilization of games in your classroom?
Yeah, totally. So there are definitely, I use like actual video games to teach certain physics concepts. But even besides that, just the idea of like you get instant feedback, you can't move forward till you've mastered something, and you're figuring out how something works instead of someone telling you how it works, like has increased engagement. And I think even particular, I think you want to get more and more gamey in your mechanics of execution in the classroom when the content is more and more objectively boring, right? Like there are certain topics, I mean, I'm teaching physics, if we're going to be solving math problems about velocity and distance and time, like that's not the most exciting thing in the world. And so, but adding game mechanics on top of that can turn like a really boring problem set into something that's actually kind of fun. And so in your own content what are the areas where engagement tends to flag, and how you could add gaming mechanics to make them even more exciting.
Great, thanks, Shane. And so now what I'm going to do, I want to jump to actually talk about some of Nova's resources that we have that are games and that can be used in science classrooms. And definitely I want the audience to sort of keep in mind a lot of the gamification factors that Shane mentioned in his presentation in some of these games. And so the two main games I want to focus on, and these are actually our two newest games. And in case you're unfamiliar with Nova Labs, so Nova Labs is a free digital platform that engages teens and lifelong learners in activities and games that foster authentic scientific exploration. And so we developed 5 of these And the first three, the sun, the energy, and the cloud lab, are more sort of simulation based. However, with the RNA and the cybersecurity lab, we definitely wanted to take an approach that was more gamified. And so I'm just going to jump into the RNA lab right now. And the RNA lab is definitely probably appropriate for high school biology students. And the purpose of this lab is to explore the role that RNA plays in the origin of life, and as well as protein synthesis and viruses. So it sort of covers every single type of RNA you can think of, from messenger RNA to transfer RNA to RNA interference. And basically, I'll just hop into one of these levels, and this is sort of the transfer RNA level. But each level is goal-oriented, and in each level you're attempting to design an RNA molecule that by coloring in the nucleotides in order to make the molecule fold properly so that it can perform its function. And so you can sort of see the mission here. So each level has a mission, and so in this one you're designing a transfer RNA. And your goal is to make it fold into that shape. And you do that by sort of manipulating this color palette at the bottom, which includes both nucleotides, but you can also paint by bonds as well. And you can see here there's sort of an instruction here about the GC bonds are the strongest connection, so you need to place them at the weakest point of the molecule. And so you actually go to that palette here and can actually sort of paint them like that. And this is sort of one of the earlier levels, and then you can sort of use the other bonds as well to fill in the rest of the molecule. Okay. And then when you're sort of done, you complete the level, and so I'm missing one part here, and then bam, I'm done. And when you're actually done, you can actually go into a wiki area and actually learn about the molecule that was built, sort of its function, and this exists for every single level of the game. Students can also watch videos as well. So there's an ecosystem of activities beyond the game that also include the actual information of what's going on. And there's sort of this larger narrative of you trying to make this cell perform its function. And each time you complete sort of these large pieces, you add them to this cell and allow it to continue to do what it has to do. And so this is, and this game, by the way, was developed actually with Eterna, which is a lab that was based out of Carnegie Mellon University. And what they actually do is this lab actually allows people to design RNA molecules that can actually help scientists develop therapies to fight cancer and other diseases. And so through this lab, students are actually participating in actual science. So this is sort of real citizen science that they can participate in after they've completed our version of the game. Another game I want to focus on is the cybersecurity lab. So in this game, students learn how to spot phishing scams, understand the basics of coding, and also how to sort of protect their data from cyber attacks. And this is really appropriate in any setting where you're teaching digital literacy or introducing students to computer science. Obviously, there's a growing need for computer science to be taught in public schools, and a lot of really great websites and organizations are doing this, like Code.org and Code Academy. And this, our approach at Nova Labs was to really focus on one specific topic, which is cybersecurity, and to really focus on how we can introduce sort of coding to students, but also focus on like the other details, which are just like how do you navigate the internet in a way that's safe and in a way that actually protects yourself from attacks and protects your data. And so I'll sort of give you a quick little rundown of each sort of type of challenge, but there are a total of 3 types of challenges: coding challenges, password cracking challenges, and social engineering challenges. And let me just hop into the coding challenge. And the coding challenge uses Blockly, which is a puzzle-based coding language, essentially. But here I have sort of a little robot, and I basically have to move these pieces, and these pieces represent lines of code, in order to navigate the robot to the star. And so I have 3 pieces there. I want to make sure that my robot turns right, and then after that, make sure that it moves forward, run the program. All right. So again, and as students complete these challenges, they then can actually grow their network. So the larger arc, narrative arc around this lab is that you are a chief technology officer of a tech startup company who has to defend their company against these attacks. And so you sort of complete these challenges, gain more coins that you can then use and distribute to your defenses. And again, oh, and Shane, by the way, please feel free to hop in at any point as I talk about this if you have sort of any comments about what's happening. Another part is the social engineering lab, and so in this lab, I'm actually let me jump into a different level. All right, so this is the social engineering challenge, and in this one, a student has to basically look at these two web pages and determine which one of these is a phishing scam and identify the differences. And so, again, this is a really, really great way to really emphasize how important it is for students to be cognizant of where they're putting their information, and to not trust every link that they're given to a website. And so here, I mean, as students click, so they have 10 clicks, and they have to find the 5 differences between these two web pages. So I can click here. Obviously, this is a pretty old logo. If I look at the URL, it's not exactly Google. It's G00 GLE. Things like it's not a secured website, changes in the font. Here there's actually a misspelling. And then identify which one. So clearly in this case it's the phishing scam. And then there's an explanation of why that is. And so this is really, really good way to, again, emphasize what students should be looking for when they're navigating the internet. So again, these are just a few examples of the games we have, and these are the two most recent labs that we developed. In addition to the cybersecurity lab, one of our partners actually developed a really great resource that I also want to highlight. And this is if you're interested in doing digital literacy, but you're teaching perhaps elementary students. This is one game that I really love, and it's called Beat the Thief. And in this game, you basically have to choose what type of information that you send to your friend. You choose to sort of blast publicly versus information that you send directly to friends. So here's this thief here, and this is Old Thiefy. And he's basically trying to stage what appears to be a home invasion, and the only way you can avoid this is by making sure that you don't share information that can be used to identify you or that has sensitive data about you. So something like you have to see frozen at rules, something that's safe to share with all. However, something that's about your schedule and about where you're going to be can be used by Old Thiefy. And so it's really teaches students, again, this is young students, so definitely ages 8 through 10, about being careful about what data they choose to share online. And so again, that's just a few examples of great resources that we've developed, and this is developed by the Center for Identity. They are a group at the University of Texas at Austin, and they really do a really great job of providing educational tools about identity theft and sort of identity management online and how to protect your data as well. So,
Ralph, can I
let me stop that. Let me just turn that off because I want that to keep playing. All right.
Ralph, can I add one thing?
Yes.
I think it's really important for all the teachers out there to realize that like the most important part, if you're going to use a game like one that's been developed, by Novo or by anybody else, the one of the biggest and most important things about doing that well is like a skilled teacher who can translate what kids are doing in the game to the more traditional like academic content, whether it's vocabulary or whatever. that students need. So you can't just put a kid in front of that game and like have them learn about cybersecurity. Afterwards or during, the teacher's got to be there saying, okay, the word for this is phishing, or why is it that you want to share X? And I think like too often, other people in school reform are looking for sort of out of the box things that can like do everything for you. But I think as a teacher, these are great resources to use, but you do get to execute them in your own style, and make sure that you're connecting. You don't want kids that can play the game but like don't understand the science, and so that's where you come in as a teacher. That's where you've got to step up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that we have done, and I'll just screen share something again to that point, is develop educator guides. So this is our educator guide for the cybersecurity lab. And if you go to the Nova Labs website, you'll see these guides there. But this one, again, we break down what the game is. We have a standards alignment guide that aligns each game to the next generation science standards, just so you know what insertion points make sense. Glossary of all the terms, just so that it's very clear what you're talking about when you're playing the game, as well as sort of content, process objectives, and links to other resources and teaching tips. And also, if you go to PBS Learning Media, we have an entire collection of lesson planning resources. So each lab comes with a lesson plan, but they also include videos, usually 4 to 8 videos for each lab. And here you can watch the videos, but also we have discussion questions to provide more context around the videos, and occasionally a few of them have background essays as well. So definitely PBS Learning Media, and if you go to the educator section of each lab, you'll find helpful resources that explain a lot of sort of how you can fit these into a lesson plan, and not just, again, these. I mean, I think it's very important to emphasize that games are not necessarily always going to be plug-and-play solutions where you can just plug them in, for 45 minutes and then leave. Like, there has to be a lot of context, and there has to be careful attention to those details. So, yeah, great point, Shane. And so again, I just want to turn our attention to a couple other resources. And I know, Shane, if you look at the showcase, you'll see there's a link to the Jeopardy Labs, which is the online Jeopardy template creator that Shane mentioned. And Shane, can you explain a few of the other resources that you've decided to include here?
Yeah, sure. So Jeopardy Labs is fun because you can make your own Jeopardy games. You can then decide to like play them whole class, or in the spirit of penalty-free practice, I like to let kids play them by themselves, which is kind of fun for them. Down here, this is really simple, just a random number service. So I have a system for management and transitions where if the whole class transitions properly, they get a point. I save the points up, and then I use this random number service to play bingo every Friday, where based on how many points they've earned, they get X many draws, and like it just kind of turns something that otherwise is kind of boring into something that's entertaining. In particular for physics, the one that says the universe and more educational physics games, if you're a physics teacher or you have to teach anything about motion graphs, there's a game called the Super Ultimate Graphing Challenge, and it is awesome. It allows students to try and recreate motion graphs by controlling parameters like distance, velocity, and time. And there's this little creature that runs around on the screen, and like it's really fun. Kids are super into beating the game, and then again, you as a teacher have to help them realize that the slopes of the lines mean what they do and other things like that. I think those are all the ones that I had put on there that I use like on the regular. But there are other ways to use, I would say, like computer simulations in general, that from the University of Colorado is super useful. You can turn those into a game because they encourage inductive reasoning, encourage kids to mess around with stuff, figure out how they work, and then apply their reasoning elsewhere.
Absolutely. And on my end, definitely, and I'm glad you mentioned simulations, because it just reminds me of sort of the other Nova Labs that we have that are much more simulation oriented. And I'll just sort of briefly show what those look like. But the other labs include the Sun Lab, which allows students to essentially to observe the sun. We developed this lab with NASA, and basically this is sort of the open investigation part of the lab. But students can go through any day in the calendar year between today and I think the data goes back as far as 1993. But they can use a variety of different instruments to observe the sun under sort of heliomagnetic imaging, or sort of standard. And here are a couple of different measurements. These are sort of wavelength bands that you can use to observe the sun, and they can actually create their own movies and screenshots from this data here. In addition, the Energy Lab, also a really great tool, allows students to create a simulation if they were a civic engineer, and they had to design. They're given a budget, and they have to achieve a renewable goal of 35% of the energy of the city coming from renewable energy sources, and they're given an available budget and an amount of area, and they basically have to look at the potential for that region. So here the city that you have is LA, and so over time they have to essentially develop a model for energy, for renewable energy for that city, and then they can test their system to see how it actually performs throughout the year. And then if it doesn't perform well, then they obviously have to go back and redesign the system and pay attention to all those factors. And the last one is our cloud lab, and this has two activities. One is a cloud typing activity, and the second part is, again, another open investigation where students can actually observe storm systems happening anywhere around the world. And again, this was also developed with NASA, so it has data that is uploaded every day. And so again, these are just some of Nova Labs resources. Other places I'd definitely recommend. So Games for Change, really great website, really great organization, and they have a variety of games that are focused on social impact and education and civic action as well. And so you can sort of browse. If you look at their education section, they have quite a few games there, and for STEM as well. But they also have a great event coming up, their festival, which is happening in April 2015, which would be a really, really great place to sort of explore what new games people are developing. In addition, while we're on the topic of sort of civic impact games, Engagement Game Lab as well. And this is a local group here, and by local I mean a Boston-based group. But they've also talked a lot about using games to talk about citizenship and civic action. And I mean, they do everything from games that focus on strategic city planning to flood prediction, but also a really, really great resource. And they're one of our partners as well. So these are just a few of the resources that on my end I'd like to share. And definitely, if you follow the Nova Labs account and the Nova Education account on Facebook and Twitter, we definitely work with a lot of different organizations and send out new updates on games that are being developed. So please feel free to follow those, and also send us any suggestions as well. Is there anything else on your end, Shane, that you'd like to talk about or mention?
No, I think just keeping in mind that you can introduce gaming mechanics into your classroom, like using even very traditional kind of old school paper and pencil style assignments. You don't need to have crazy technology or other things, but that if you can get your hands on some of these digital tools, they're made well and they're inherently engaging, and so it really does pay off to get that engagement factor going. And some of these resources are really cool, and I'm excited to use some myself.
All right. Yeah, we had to make that plug in at some point. But yeah, thank you again, Shane, for definitely contributing so much with regards to your own experience and sort of framework for how gaming can and should work in classrooms. And definitely just going to go over to the questions. If anybody has a question, I don't see any yet, but definitely feel free to submit them. We're also on Twitter as well, so I'm just trying to see if there are any questions there. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in to this webinar. Again, if you go and visit the page, you'll find all the resources that we mentioned in the showcase. So just open the Showcase app when you open the video, and you'll see the list of resources on the right, and you can link to any of them easily. If you want to, if you have any additional questions, again, you can reach out to us on Twitter at the Nova Labs. Also, I think Shane, will also be taking questions on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken.
At EL Physics. Yep.
All right. What is it again?
At EL Haynes Physics. No dots, just EL Haynes and Physics, the full word.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
So please send us any of your questions, and thank you again for joining, and definitely stay tuned for future webinars and events, have fun engaging your students with these resources, and definitely give us feedback. Thank you.